For a long time, the Kurdish question was treated as a domestic issue, an internal file to be managed or suppressed inside 4 states: Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. But a local file does not survive for 100 years unless something deeper is wrong with the map itself. By 2025, that deeper problem is no longer hidden. The Kurdish question has become a fault line cutting across borders, armies, pipelines, and alliances. It's no longer just about one people demanding recognition. It's about 4 states struggling to preserve a political order that is slowly eroding. In this video, we'll explore 3 things: why the Kurdish question did not go away, how it turned into a regional time bomb, and what this means for the next decade in the Middle East. The Kurdish question didn't start with a single uprising or a single leader. It started with a border. After World War I, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire briefly opened a window where a Kurdish state was mentioned in diplomatic texts. The Treaty of Sèvres in 1920 spoke of a possible Kurdish entity. But 3 years later, the Treaty of Lausanne closed that window completely. Instead of one political framework for Kurdish regions, the new regional order did something else. It distributed the Kurds among 4 new states, each with its own national project. Each of these states was built around a strict idea of a unitary national identity. In Turkey, it was Turkishness, one language, one flag. In Iran, it was a centralized Persian-led state, first under the Shah, then under the Islamic Republic. In Iraq and Syria, it was Arab nationalist republics rooted in Ba'athist ideology. The Kurds did not fit this model. They weren't a small minority. They were millions, living across strategic mountains, borders, and energy routes. So the Kurdish question was never just a minority issue. It was a structural contradiction between a map designed for centralized nation-states and a stateless nation spread across those borders. This contradiction explains why the Kurdish file survived every coup, every regime change, and every new constitution. To understand why the crisis became regional, we must examine how each state managed it. In Turkey, the founding principle was simple: one nation, one language. Kurdish identity was treated as a competing loyalty. So the state used denial, calling Kurds mountain Turks, banning their language and organizations, and later launching a heavy security doctrine against groups like the PKK. The result was not assimilation, but militarization. In Iran, under both the Shah and the Islamic Republic, Kurdish regions were seen as peripheral but sensitive. Tehran followed a strict security-first logic, limited cultural concessions when convenient, but harsh repression whenever demands became political. The state's message was clear: be Kurdish culturally, but never politically. Because these regions sit on borders, any unrest is viewed as foreign infiltration, creating permanent tension. In Iraq, the Kurdish question erupted into open war earlier than anywhere else. Arabization campaigns, chemical attacks, and forced displacement created a deep historical wound. But from that wound emerged the Kurdistan region of Iraq, with its own parliament, institutions, and Peshmerga forces. This didn't solve the question, but it changed its form. Iraq's Kurds became a semi-recognized actor, caught between Baghdad, Ankara, and Tehran. And in Syria, for decades, Syrian Kurds were denied basic recognition. Hundreds of thousands lacked citizenship. Ba'athist social engineering tried to dilute the Kurdish presence. After 2011, when the state withdrew from the northeast, Kurdish-led structures filled the vacuum. They function like a state in many ways, but their fate is now shaped by Ankara, Damascus, Moscow, and Washington. Across all 4 states, one pattern emerges. Kurdish identity was framed as a security threat. Independent Kurdish organization was treated as a danger. Identity was allowed only as folklore, not as power. A century of this produced not stability, but a slow-burning crisis. So why is the Kurdish question more dangerous in 2025 than it was in 1980 or 1990? 3 layers have converged. First, a crisis of legitimacy. Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria all face economic decline, corruption, wars, sanctions, and generational divides. Strong states can negotiate. Fragile states securitize everything. Even peaceful Kurdish demands are now interpreted as threats to regime survival. Second, strategic geography. Kurdish regions sit on cross-border trade routes, major oil and gas reserves, and corridors used by both state and non-state forces. As global competition intensifies, these corridors become more valuable. Any shift in control in Kurdish areas affects Turkish military strategy, Iranian regional influence, Iraqi internal politics, Syrian territorial claims, and even US military positioning. A local question becomes a regional security file. Third, a connected Kurdish public sphere. For much of the 20th century, Kurdish communities were isolated. Now, they function as a shared public sphere. A protest in Iran, a clash in Syria, an election in Iraq, or a drone strike in Turkey all circulate instantly. This doesn't create a single Kurdish strategy, but it does foster a shared sense of fate. For the states, it looks like a threatening network. For the Kurds, it looks like an unfinished map. The most fragile areas today are the borderlands where the time bomb is wired, the Kandil Mountains straddling Iraq, Iran, and Turkey, the Sinjar corridor between Nineveh and Syria, the Syria-Turkey frontier, and the Iran-Iraq border crowded with rival forces. These zones all share layered control, where armies, militias, local forces, and foreign actors all operate. They have ambiguous sovereignty, with no single actor holding a monopoly of force. And they are battlegrounds of competing narratives, where each side claims legitimacy, defense, or counterterrorism. Here, a miscalculation is easy. A single drone strike, a cross-border raid, or a symbolic protest could ignite regional consequences. So, what comes next? The Kurdish question will not disappear. The real question is how it will shape the region. One scenario is managed containment. The states continue suppressing armed groups, making tactical deals, and using the Kurdish file as leverage, all while avoiding a final settlement. The bomb doesn't explode, but it keeps ticking. Another scenario is fragmented escalation. The crisis spreads unevenly, fighting in one country, protests in another, paralysis in a third. There's no regional framework, just rising instability and a slide toward an all-or-nothing confrontation. But there is a third scenario, the just solution: federalism, autonomy, and the right to self-determination. In this scenario, the Kurdish question moves out of the security room and into a political framework that recognizes Kurdish national rights as essential to long-term stability. This has worked in dozens of multi-ethnic states worldwide. The core idea is simple. Middle East stability cannot rely on an unresolved, century-old file affecting 40 million people without political recognition. The Kurds are not a minority, they are a people. A people of this size requires a structured political model. Federalism is the most realistic model. It's not secession or division, it's constitutional power sharing. For Kurds, federalism provides local resource management, a regional parliament, official language status, and predictable relations with the central state. The Kurdistan region of Iraq illustrates this. Despite its flaws, it remains Iraq's most stable region since 2003. Federalism turns identity into legitimacy, not conflict. Where full federalism isn't ready, autonomy offers a transitional framework. This can include elected councils, local legislation, control over local services, and an education system shaped by Kurdish identity. Autonomy preserves state unity while lowering tensions and fostering development. It moves conflict from weapons to institutions. Underpinning all of this is the principle of self-determination. This doesn't automatically mean independence. International law includes multiple outcomes, from union to federalism to independence when conditions allow. Ignoring this right fuels conflict. Recognizing it creates legitimacy. Why is this the just and stable solution? It recognizes reality. The Kurds are a nation, not a security issue. It reduces state costs because repression is expensive while autonomy is sustainable. It unlocks the strategic economic value of Kurdish regions. And most importantly, it prevents future explosions. Without a political solution, this file will return. Stronger each time. Is this scenario easy? No. But denial has failed for 100 years. Militarization has failed. Closed borders have failed. This is the only path that distributes power fairly, protects identities, and grants the Kurds their natural rights. Federalism, autonomy, and self-determination are not radical ideas. They are the only just and sustainable framework for a century-old question. They do not weaken states, they give them a future. They do not threaten stability, they build it. The Kurdish question became a Middle East time bomb, not because Kurds changed their demands, but because the region itself changed. Ignoring this file will not make it disappear. It will only ensure the next crisis is larger and harder to contain. Stability in the 21st century cannot be built on a problem abandoned in the 20th. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world.